Hey friends! So as a designer, I'm often involved in quite a lot of research throughout my job. And so I put out a question on Twitter asking you all what you wanted to know about the research process and how I do user testing. So a few of you asked me some questions and I'm going to answer them now in this video. So the first question is from Waldo. He would love to know what goes into the preparation process and what kind of questions we ask ahead of time. So typically when we're preparing to do research, the researcher will work closely with the product manager and also the designer to have a discussion around what it is we want to research. We might also look at the data and try and find places where there's maybe some unanswered questions. So based on those discussions, we come up with a few different scenarios of what we want to test, and the researcher will go away and create a questionnaire or an interview guide. The next part of Waldo's question is, what kind of feedback do you need to justify certain changes? And this is a really good question because I often find that as soon as I get one piece of feedback or insight from one user, I straight away want to go and change it and improve it and make it better for that person. But that might just be one person that experiences it that way. So I think it's really important to have a proportionate pool of people that you test. And from there you can find common themes, common challenges, and common topics. And maybe also match that with the data to see if it fits and matches the things that you are seeing in the data as well. And then from there you can draw conclusions around what are common struggles, what are common challenges, and decide from there what to actually make changes on. At what stages do you propose research or testing phases? Okay, I propose to do it at the start, the middle, and the end. So the first stage at the beginning is a really good opportunity for you to learn more about the problem space. The second step is the middle stage, and this is often a good place where you probably have some prototypes, you probably have some ideas, maybe you've got two concepts that you are not sure which one to go with. So the middle stage is a really good time to test those prototypes and see which one works, which one doesn't, and which path you want to take forward. And the third stage is at the very end of the project. And by this I mean after you've launched. So I find it's always super helpful to go back and do some research after you've actually shipped something to learn from the market and see how it's performing. And the last part of Waldo's question is how to convince your client why they need to do research. Well, you are not your user, right? So it's very easy for you to jump straight in and think that you know the best experience to design or to create, but then there's a risk that you might put it out in the world and it will totally fail, and that could be really, really expensive to have to start again from scratch. Ingrid asks, what do you do to prep, set up, and do the testing? So the first thing we do is we recruit. The next thing we do is set team roles. First is the researcher, obviously, that's the person conducting the interview. Then we have a note taker, like I said earlier. And then we have a third person who's usually there to help out with like the tech and make sure that the video stream is working well, checking the chat, making sure the audio is okay. And then fourth, sometimes we also have a photographer. And I don't mean like a legit professional photographer, but just one of us from the team whose job it is throughout the interview is to take photos now and then. The next thing we do is we set up the environment for the test. There's a few things to consider in your environment. The first thing is having refreshments available. We've had interviews that have gone up to 2 hours long, so you want to make sure that there's some refreshments available for your participant, like water, maybe coffee, tea, some biscuits, things like that, just to make them feel comfortable and invited into your space. The second thing we consider when setting up the environment is the seating arrangement. So we often have a researcher that will sit kind of across and next to the participant, who is often sitting at the head of the table. The rest of us will kind of crowd around, and then if we have an interpreter, they will also be sitting there next to the researcher. You want the researcher to be talking directly to the participant, so you want to have that level of conversation there. So the last thing obviously is to conduct your test, and some ground rules that we often have is no talking, no phones or like cameras around, and the third rule we have is no interruptions. The next question is from Shihan, who asks, how would you approach people and don't look weird? So ideally you have a sample set of the kind of people that you want to do your test with, and you can actually reach out to them with a professional branded email or perhaps a phone call to actually recruit them and bring them in for a user testing session. Okay, 10 is next, and they also have a few questions. The first one is, what kind of tasks do you do the most? With researching, the most common thing that I participate in as a designer is prototype testing. What's the most frustrating thing about field research? I don't know what the most frustrating thing is, but they can be very exhausting. And I feel like you have to be open to change and things happening and moving really quickly. Do you have a system, or does your company have a system for recording data, and what is that like? So there's two things that we do. The first is we record any sessions that we can with video and audio, and sometimes also screen recording if we are doing a prototype on a phone, so that we can have that recording saved and stored in case we want to go and look back at it and pull out really interesting takeaways. Another thing we do is that we have a dedicated note taker for each interview we do. All of this data is used later on, where we kind of pull out the takeaways and the interesting parts and put them into the research report and discuss them in the synthesis. Alexa asks a pretty important question. How do you communicate with colleagues while testing, or do you not and only talk later? So it's very important to have some kind of communication throughout an interview. If you have people dialing in remotely, it's nice to have them also be able to participate and ask questions and discuss things as the interview is going. We use Google Chat, and we have a group that everyone's invited into. And the last question is from Pixel Geek, aka Nelson. I'd like to know what the most common questions are that you ask the testers. Now, this can really depend on what we're interviewing, as our questions are often quite specific to the insights that we want to uncover. But as a general rule of thumb, we always begin our interviews by getting to know one another. Another general type of question that I ask is either asking why or what. Why did you tap there? Why did you go back? What were you expecting to happen next? What were you expecting to see there? What are you thinking right now? I think the why and the what questions really help you to uncover or get a little bit more of an idea of what that person might be thinking, what they're trying to do, and that can also help you understand what their goals and motivations are. I will link some recommended tools that we use in our interviews, such as this really cool, awesome user testing camera that kind of looks down on the screen that you're testing. It's really, really useful. I really recommend this book called The Field Study Handbook by Jan Chipchase. He does amazing work, incredible researcher, and this book will probably tell you everything you need to know a lot better than I can about research. Okay, that's it for this topic on research. Thank you to those of you who asked questions. If you have more that I didn't answer right here in this video, then you can ask me in a comment or send me a tweet, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you. Bye.